Let's go to Charles Ellinas, CEO, Cyprus Natural Hydrocarbons Company, and Senior Fellow at the Global Energy Center for the Atlantic Council. Charles, your thoughts at the end of this week, the Gulf tour of the president, but also within that, a number of other major events that started the week with the China-US stepping back from the crisis, the trade war crisis, and also finishing with the Russian-Ukraine meeting that didn't happen. Where are these bigger global events playing out and their relevance for the energy markets?
Well, the fact that the worst of the tariffs problem didn't materialize, and it seems now that that is going towards some kind of resolution through bilateral deals, that has given the markets a relief. We've seen the stock markets rise very, very fast. Hope has returned, but in general, worldwide, but in places like Europe, it hasn't had the same effect. As you know, Trump is still avoiding Europe. There is still concern about what will happen with Europe. And perhaps later on we can discuss European gas. That was the subject of a big conference in Amsterdam where I was over the last few days. But the Russia-Ukraine thing, it's going to start. I think the discussions will start, but I don't expect that we will see anything major, but it will be the beginning towards something, maybe later on. So that also seems to be sort of taking pressure, a little bit of pressure away from the global situation. I think it's important to see what countries like India, South Korea, Japan, and later China do as a result of this change in direction on tariffs, and how fast.
I mean, it's a change in direction, but ultimately there's still quite a significant amount of tariffs and a significant amount of issues still to be dealt with, in the sense of how big of a disruption is this idea of pause? Does pause, the language is all weird here. I mean, they use the sort of elusive word deal. What does deal mean? It's not a contract that anybody's signing. There's a pause. There's a 90-day pause. What does pause mean? Does the world interpret pause as this is over?
Not necessarily over, but the discussion, it gives time for discussions and resolution. The actual deal between the UK and the United States is pointing towards a direction that, for me, it's hopeful that the situation with China would not have gone as far as that unless behind the scenes, the two countries believe that they are going to go somewhere. And I think they will. At the end of the pause, China and the US will end up with a deal. And once you have UK starting the process, China coming into it in 3 months, I think the rest of the world will fall into place.
On that point, Dr. Charles, one of the obviously big unknowns in the mix there as we started our conversation today is the talks that didn't really happen in Turkey, but ultimately the momentum of a resolution, or at least some kind of a ceasefire between Russia and Ukraine. One of the big headlines of the week, despite all of the others, was Trump saying, and his Secretary of Foreign Secretary saying that this will require Trump to meet personally with Putin to get this sorted. It seems like the next mountain to climb now will be setting up a meeting between Trump and Putin. But meanwhile, there's positioning around the situation, whether Europe and Russia returns to some kind of engagement where sanctions would drop away. Of course, industry and various stakeholders cannot wait until we can't all be on pause until there's actually a deal. So we're seeing the likes of Mercuria Energy Group, one of the world's biggest independent energy and commodity traders, taking a huge position in aluminium on the London Metal Exchange on a bet that easing of sanctions against Moscow will really tighten the aluminum market. So we're seeing big bets already being made on this activity happening. We're seeing a big court case in Switzerland regarding the Nord Stream pipeline bankruptcy, and that seems to be being paused in anticipation that maybe there'll be a new lifeline there. All by that is coming to my question as even if all of these things do come to fruition, the deal with Russia. Does Europe likely change its spots? Does it have a big win or a lose here? How do you see that playing out from an energy point of view?
Well, the problem is that the European Commission seems to be bent on ideology and on driving this switch away from Russian gas completely. The shutting down of all Russian gas supplies to Europe by 2027 is being expedited by European Commission. They plan to put it in place by next month. But at this conference in Amsterdam, where everybody was there, the industry was there, not many believe that it's going to happen. The view is that if there is a peace between Russia and Ukraine, the fact that Russian gas is so much cheaper than anything else, and Europe has great problems with competitiveness, losing industry. Only recently, the chemicals industry warned that they are going to relocate to other parts of the world because they cannot afford to continue operating in Europe and in Germany. All of these point out to a situation where eventually money will tell. Basically, cheap Russian resources will prevail. And there was also a presentation on this. And we were reminded that if you look historically back, even to the last 2 centuries, Russian commodities have always been coming to Europe, irrespective of wars, irrespective of politics. Russian commodities continue coming to Europe, and they will continue coming to Europe as long as they are cheaper. The European industry, Europe cannot ignore them. So one way or another, these politics by the European Commission are considered to be temporary. And if we see
What about, I mean, something, I mean, in the politics of the European Union, European Commission is they want to, like the Gulf perhaps, they want to please their bodyguard, Mr. Trump, who is threatening to remove their security blanket. And so they want to show very clearly that they're willing to continue to buy US LNG. That's part of the grand new bargain. This is the new world.
buying US LNG will continue. I mean, US LNG will continue to be a major component of European gas industry, gas imports. That will not stop. But as Europe, I mean, there is an expectation that gas in Europe will continue to be used in large quantities. I mean, the European target to reduce emissions by 90% by 2040 implies that gas utilization in Europe would go down by 2/3. Nobody believes that. Nobody believes that that is going to happen, especially the last developments of energy security problems like in the Spain and Portugal, but also in the UK, point towards a direction where gas is proving to be indispensable to the future.
Your thoughts on that same thesis, particularly I welcome there has also some significant changes this week in your corner of the Mediterranean, Syria, Turkey. Syria got sanctions relief from the president of the US, essentially a blessing of the new government in Damascus. We've seen in the same week, I mean, it's incredible stuff that would otherwise in another week be front page news everywhere. The PKK, the Kurdish insurgency in Turkey that's been 40 years destabilizing the country came to an end, and on the back pages, nobody really paying much attention. But I'm wondering from your perspective, how big are these developments for the East Med, for future opportunities in that region?
Well, as far as the energy is concerned in the East Med, the greatest problem continues to be Egypt. Egypt is in dire straits. They have just retained a new FSRU. They have now 4 FSRUs. And to me, all that indicates that Egypt has given up on the hope of recovering gas production and depends now greatly on importing LNG, very expensive LNG. They are unable to keep up payments with the oil companies. The oil companies go slow, production goes down, and Egypt has been caught in this vicious circle, and it's getting very worrying because it has a massive impact on their balance of payments. And I think when the dust settles in the countries around Egypt, Egypt will become the center of attention later in the year as to how to help Egypt out of this predicament. The problems are increasing, and the neighbors, I mean, Israel, for example, is not going to export any more gas to Egypt because they feel they have gone too far. The deals with Cyprus may or may not happen that fast because the oil companies are slowing down new investments. And Egypt is caught in a sort of a vicious circle in energy. So all these positive developments with PKK, with Syria are very, very welcome, taking political pressure away from the region. But I think the future will be around Egyptian problems with energy and how to deal with them. Egypt seems to be incapable of sorting these things by itself. It needs help.